Tonight is my 200th episode, and I'm extremely grateful for all of the love and support that each of you have given to the podcast over the years, and I look forward to what the next 200 episodes will bring. As I record tonight's show, the Paranormal Mysteries podcast is coming up on 6 million downloads, and while this may be just a number, it reminds me of where I started and how far the show has come. So, to our regular listeners, our hundreds of storytellers, and our supporters on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, thank you. Thank you for joining me and welcome to Paranormal Mysteries. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. On today's episode, I'll be returning to one of my favorite cryptids as we take a look at more bizarre encounters and reported attacks involving the Dogman. But before we start, I'd like to thank Paul for his support and generosity. And for anyone else who would like to support the show, you can do so by sharing and reviewing the podcast, as well as visiting us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. All of these methods help to make the show possible, and we truly appreciate your support. And if you have a paranormal story to tell, you can contact me by email at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, through voice message at speakpipe.com/paranormalmysteries, or on our website at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com. And keep in mind that links to our contact information, forum, and donation websites can be found in the show notes. And now, let's begin tonight's show. Reported in almost every region of the world, sightings of a bizarre creature known as the Dogman seem to be steadily increasing. But how likely is it that such an unusual and downright absurd monster could actually exist? And what on earth could be the cause for such an abomination? Many people believe that the Dogman's origins aren't from this world, or even this reality as we know it, but from another dimension entirely. Now, the idea of alternate dimensions or portals leading to those dimensions may seem like science fiction, but many scientists theorize that this is a valid explanation for some of the unexplained phenomena taking place throughout the world. In fact, there have even been accounts of portals opening and the eyewitnesses seeing entities emerge. One such case reportedly occurred on Skinwalker Ranch, when two members of Robert Bigelow's NIDS team witnessed what they believed to be a portal opening and a large humanoid figure crawl out and run through the nearby field. Now, of course, there's no hard evidence that Dogman even exists, let alone evidence of where they come from, but this theory is intriguing to say the least. But what I find the most fascinating about this alleged cryptid is its outlandish description, and the fact that hundreds of reports are being submitted every year by people that have nothing to gain from making up a fictitious sighting. And if we maintain a skeptical approach and assume that 99% of these are misidentified animals or hallucinations, that still leaves us with a very worrisome 1%, which still equates to a large number of valid sightings, and possible proof that there is indeed something very terrifying and very unnatural living and hunting in our forests. As I mentioned in episode 22, documented sightings of the Dogman date back to the early 1800s, if not farther. And in 1987, Steve Cook of WTCM Radio in Traverse City, Michigan, played a pivotal but unintentional role in bringing even more reports into the public eye. His song, which he called The Legend, was meant to be an April Fool's joke, in which he recounted actual eyewitness reports from many years prior. Although Cook didn't take these reports seriously at the time, many of his radio listeners did, and hearing his song spurred hundreds of otherwise hesitant eyewitnesses to come forward with their encounters of this strange animal. Now, 34 years later, Dogman encounters continue to be reported, and many niche paranormal investigation groups have focused their attention solely on this so-called cryptid. There's even a number of podcasts that only interview Dogman witnesses, one of them being Vic Cundiff's Dogman Encounters Radio, which you can find a link to in the show notes. But as prevalent as it is in paranormal circles, the Dogman is still relatively unknown to the general public, at least when compared to other cryptids like Sasquatch or Chupacabra. And for this reason, I'd like to share several new stories with you tonight. Now, some listeners may find these reports a little graphic, so please be warned. Our first encounter comes from a witness living near Eddyville, Kentucky, which is situated just northeast of the land between the lakes, also known as LBL. This beautiful but strange area of southwest Kentucky has had its fair share of large bipedal creature encounters, and I covered a few of them in episodes 74 and 82. This particular account was posted on November 17, 2020, on a site called The Cloaked Hedgehog, and you can find a link to their site in the show notes. This experience is also accompanied by some pretty interesting but graphic pictures of a deer carcass, which you can also find via the link that I provided. I will also add these photos to our forum, which you can find on our website and in the show notes. This is what the witness had to say. On October 23rd, I woke up to a gang of cows raising hell on my property. It was just getting daylight outside. I grabbed my shotgun, loaded with double-aught buckshot, and I noticed the dead deer balled up on the edge of one of my ponds. As I walked over to investigate, I stopped and noticed the crows were alerting to something 40 yards up the hill from the deer. I went back to my home and got dressed. I holstered my 1911 chambered in .45 caliber and switched to my semi-automatic .308 rifle and went back. I decided to get above where the crows were at and flush out whatever was there. When I moved in above that spot, the crows left, and I found a large depression in the leaves behind a big log from the deer. I went down and dragged the deer up behind that log, and that's when I noticed how strange the deer had been mutilated and brutalized. I then decided to take pictures of the deer and the spot where it had been placed. There were no drag marks, no prints, no blood, no guts or tufts of hair anywhere around that area. The deer had been carried and dumped there in a depression for an attack on whatever would investigate the deer kill. The deer's head had been bitten down on, and the wound on the left side of the deer's head had punctures through its skull, and the other scraped the skull. It was a massive creature to have bitten down on that deer's head like that. Also, the deer's backbone was ripped out from the abdomen, and the deer's right leg was broken above its hock. There was no blunt force trauma anywhere on the deer's body. The deer's shoulders were turned inside out, and its back loins were removed, and the deer was completely drained of all its blood. All of the deer's white underbelly was removed along with its guts. All of the diaphragm was cleanly ripped out with the guts. Whatever had done that was incredibly powerful. The diaphragm muscle is extremely strong, and no known predator is capable of removing the diaphragm in that manner, not even a human. I searched the rest of the day for the deer's kill site on my farm, but I never found where the deer had been killed on my property. The deer was killed off my property and carried a long way to place it next to my pond. The pictures attached are of the deer and the spot next to my pond where I found the deer. Added note, the deer looked like it was caught with a bite on the head, raised up off its feet, grabbed by its hind leg, and punched through its underbelly to its spine, and ripped its spine out for the kill. That is my assumption of how the deer was killed. I thought the morning event was the end, but later that night at 12 o'clock exactly, something massive let out a deep, gravelly howl that lasted about 10 seconds. An hour later, something was outside, growling and circling my home. It circled my place about 70 times and tried to open my door and tried to pull one of my windows out by its frame. It also raked its claws on the sides of my home as it circled, and just before daylight the next morning, it left. All during the next day I had a strange, uneasy feeling that something was wrong and that I was in danger. The second night it came back, and I opened the blind of the window at my kitchen sink to see what this thing was. It was dark with a little moonlight outside, and then it walked by my window. My heart sunk as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. This creature was walking upright on 2 legs. I could see its arms swinging as it walked. It had a head the size of a large grizzly bear with ears about 7 inches long and a long snout. It stood approximately 8 feet tall and was all black. I watched it several times pass by my window as it kept circling my home. I put down the shotgun and picked up my .308 rifle, knowing that I had no chance with the shotgun if I had to defend myself. This creature then stopped at the window, walked up to it, and bent down to look inside. I raised my rifle and aimed it at its head. It couldn't see me where I was standing off to one side. Then both of its ears turned towards me, and I flipped off the safety switch in case I had to shoot it. It stood there listening and then backed away slowly and continued circling my home, raking its claws and testing my windows and door. The size of this monster! It could have easily ripped through a wall or door with little effort. I estimated its size from shoulder to shoulder at 38 inches, with massive arms and an upper body. I never saw its eyes as it was dark outside, and it was all black. It circled my home about 30 times in 4 hours the second night and walked away. I waited for about an hour and then decided to go to bed. After about 30 minutes of laying in bed, I could hear something approaching the wall where my head was. Once it got closer, I could hear a heartbeat. As it got closer, the heartbeat got louder. Then I could hear the bristly fur rubbing against the wall at my headboard. The heartbeat got louder and louder, and my dog, while hiding and shaking, started whining as if he was dying. I then jumped off my bed and grabbed my rifle. I thought that I might be somehow hearing my own heartbeat, so I checked my pulse, and my pulse was slower than what I was hearing. The heartbeat got so loud that I could hear the blood pumping through its heart. The blood sounded fizzy, like cola was pumping through its heart. This spooky heartbeat lasted for about 2 minutes, and then as the creature backed away, the heartbeat slowly faded until the creature left, and the heartbeat stopped. I don't think it has come back since I heard the heartbeat, but I seriously believe that it will be back with more elaborate tricks to either kill me or run me off my place. I went ahead and gave you the long version of what happened here. I am a U.S. Marine combat veteran and a former law enforcement officer. Following the submission of this story, the owner and curator of the Cloaked Hedgehog, who goes by the name Anna, got back in touch with the eyewitness to ask some follow-up questions, and I'll be reading the rest of the conversation between Anna and the eyewitness verbatim. In my follow-up, I asked the witness some questions, and I found out that he was living on that property as a teen, but that nothing peculiar seemed to happen there in those days, even though that was when the most famous LBL attacks were taking place. The witness has asked the neighbors if they noticed anything weird. One claimed he had heard what sounded like a person walking around the woods at night near his home, and another had warned the witness about something that comes around at night. The window the Dogman looked through is 7 feet off the ground at its center, and the Dogman had to bend down to look in. The deer that was killed was not just any deer, but one that the witness had saved and fed daily. The deer would alert him when anything came around or was out of place. It was his friend. The witness is sure that if he hadn't paid attention to the crows alerting him to where the Dogman was possibly lying and waiting to kill him, that he wouldn't be here now. And now we get to the special, peculiar aspects of the story. The heartbeat. This is the first time I've ever heard of anything like this. Thus, I made sure to ask the witness if he truly was sure that it was a heartbeat he had heard and nothing else, such as drumming or distant machinery. The witness was adamant that both he and his dog could clearly hear the heartbeat. It was so loud, even though he has poor hearing, that it was almost as if he was wearing headphones with this sound coming through them. The heartbeat also seemed to have a particular adverse effect on his dog, like it was torturous to it. The witness also told me about the same time last year that he found a deer fawn in the exact same area near the pond. The fawn had been attacked, but was still barely alive and bawling with pain. The witness says, "I had to put it out of its misery. I chalked it up to a dog attack. I am starting to think that maybe it was using my abandoned farm as a hunting ground. My farm is totally secluded, and no one ventures on this property, and even now, where they know I patrol my property. If this Dogman is making a peace offering, it is going about it all the wrong way. It killed the one deer it should have left alone, and stalked me for 2 days. I am a U.S. Marine and heavily armed here with also night vision. I recently purchased shotgun slugs designed for killing grizzly bears, and I set up tripwire alarms and a perimeter around my home and game cameras. So far, I have only captured pictures of some resident raccoons. Also, when this dogman was harassing me, I had a game camera set where I fed deer, and there were coyotes here during that time. I have never captured pictures of coyotes here before or after, and have never seen or heard any coyotes here. I am an avid hunter and survivalist, and I believe I will start working on an underground shelter. I was planning to build an underground shelter for the tornadoes here, but now with an 8-foot-tall dogman, I will be digging in. After my encounter, I started researching what I saw here, and I am shocked that there are so many encounters here, and a hive of dogmen living near an abandoned sawmill in Grand Rivers. Grand Rivers is just 18 miles away by driving there. I have noticed other strange and unusual things that I don't know what it is. Things that triggered my game cameras and harass the deer here. I have no idea what those things are. The witness also tells me that buzzards won't ever touch a deer that's been killed by a dogman. Anything else in the area doesn't last a day, but the buzzards never go near a dogman kill. This next encounter comes from a report on the North American Dogman Project website, and it occurred in Alaska on Trunk Road between Highway 3 and East Palmer-Wasilla Highway. And the witness says this: "My encounter took place many years ago. I never had the faintest explanation for it until a couple months ago when I randomly stumbled across Dogman on the internet. I was in my early 20s, working swing shifts at the time and commuting about 100 miles each way, so it was usually around 2 in the morning by the time I got home. I saw the monster, as I called it, on the northernmost section of Trunk Road in the Matanuska Valley in Alaska. This area is roughly smack dab in between the towns of Palmer and Wasilla. I was only about 10 miles from home at the time, so it must have been around 2 a.m. Trunk Road is a narrow 2-lane road consisting of nothing but twists and turns. The surrounding terrain is somewhat swampy and thick with black spruce. It was late October, just days before Halloween. There was no snow on the ground, but it was cold enough to be wary of ice. I was driving an 82 Subaru southwest going about 20 miles per hour around a curve when my headlights caught a large, dark figure up ahead. I'm bad at judging distance, but it was maybe 6 car lengths away. I instinctively let off the gas and coasted closer. At first I assumed it was a moose, as the area is infested with them. But no, it was standing upright. Bear then. No, not a bear. It looked so strange. Tall enough to be an uncommonly large bear, but far too slender, and it looked like it had spikes running down its neck and back. A Halloween prop? Odd but effective place for one. All those thoughts ran through my head in a fraction of a second. The car was still coasting closer, and I could see more details. It was standing in profile, gazing across the road. I could clearly see its wolfish muzzle, large, upright ears. The spikes on its back were, in fact, clumps of fur. Its spine curved in a smooth, very natural-looking way. It was standing in the ditch, inches from the pavement. Because I was focused on its upper body, I do not recall anything about its back legs, or if it had a tail. I did see its front legs, though. Very doggy-looking, hanging awkwardly down and slightly toward its front, exactly as you'd expect if a dog stood upright. While it clearly had a canine look, there was still something off about it that I cannot articulate. It was perfectly still, and at this point, given the proximity to Halloween, I was quite convinced it was some sort of Halloween prop, because it was clearly not any kind of existing animal. I was deeply impressed and gently stepped on the brakes, intending to stop and examine it closer. Then it turned its head towards me. In the tiny fraction of a second that it took for it to swivel its head, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The fluidity of its movement removed any and all doubt that this was some kind of prop. It was horribly, terrifyingly alive. The pale, off-white glow of its eyeshine in the headlights destroyed any possibility of it being a human in a costume. I think I sat there gaping at it in shock for a few seconds, the car barely moving by now, but still inching closer. As I was almost upon it, I think it could have leaned out forward and touched the car if it had wanted to. I had to look up to see its face, and again, I'm a bad judge of such things, but I'm 5'4", and it was a hell of a lot taller than me. Tall like a polar bear standing. 7 or even 8 feet, I really can't say. I snapped out of my trance and slammed on the gas. The car fishtailed and I prepared myself for death by monster, as I was certain that I'd end up in the ditch, but the tires caught the pavement and I drove like a complete maniac all the way home. I did not look back. I have only been on that section of road a few times since, never alone and never in the dark. For the next several years of driving that commute, I went 20+ miles out of the way to avoid Trunk Road. That thing never made any aggressive moves, but there was something about it that felt very, predatory. I never saw anything remotely like it again, and I never heard any stories about it in that area. The next encounter I'd like to share with you also comes from the North American Dogman Project, and this one took place in Alberta, Canada on December 1st, 2012. The report was taken during an interview with the eyewitness, and I'll be reading the account from the perspective of the interviewer. In this report, a husband and wife were out cross-country skiing. They had just crossed a remote country road and were about to ski across a field. On the other side of this field, they spotted an extremely large wolf standing just inside the tree line. The wife said that she felt uncomfortable as this creature was staring right at them and following their every movement. Her husband was carrying a .22 rifle on his back on a sling. He brought the rifle down, chambered a cartridge, and fired into the ground in front of the creature. She said that the creature just looked at the ground, then back at them, and began to growl. She said that the growl went up and down in sound, and it was very deep and menacing. She said that her husband shouldered his rifle again, but did not fire, and what really gave her the chills was the look on the creature's face. She felt that the creature knew that the rifle was a small caliber and was not something that could kill it with one shot. Moments later, her husband fired again, this time into a tree that was right next to the creature. The creature didn't even flinch, but what it did next made both of them flee in terror. About 30 seconds after the second shot, the creature stood up on 2 legs. One of its front legs or arms was against the tree that her husband had shot. The growling continued, but it had increased in volume by quite a bit, and the creature was now moving its jaws up and down like it was gnashing its teeth. Her husband then fired 3 shots directly at the creature, all 3 hitting it in the chest. The creature then let out a drawn-out scream or howl and ran off into the forest on 2 legs, and they fled the other way back towards their vehicle. As they were skiing back, they had to pass through a small area of the forest, and as they were passing through the forest, they could hear something running towards them from a distance through the woods. They cleared the woods without anything happening, but when they broke out of the forest, they estimated that whatever was chasing them was no more than 35 to 40 yards behind them. She had her cell phone with her and was thinking about using it to take a picture of the creature. As she was thinking this, she suddenly got a feeling that if she took a photograph, the creature would kill both of them. She said that the feeling was so strong that she immediately shoved the phone back in her pocket. It wasn't as if the creature had sent her a psychic message or anything. It was just a feeling. One thing she then mentioned in a hushed and embarrassed voice was that when her husband and her made it back to their vehicle, she noticed that she had actually urinated in her pants. She didn't even notice until the adrenaline rush ended. She had actually been so scared that she lost control of her bladder, and she had always thought that that was just something that happened in the movies. Specific details regarding the eyewitness's sighting are as follows. Location: Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta, near the town of Coleman. Time of day: 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. The color of the creature was dark or black. The height of the creature when it was standing on 4 legs was 3 to 3.5 feet tall, but the height of the creature when it stood on 2 legs was 6.5 to 7 feet tall. The bizarre details surrounding Dogman encounters are no doubt hard to believe, and in many ways seem to be pulled straight out of a horror movie. But at the end of the day, is it safe to assume that these stories are nothing more than misidentified animals or overactive imagination? I'm not so sure. But I'll let you be the judge. I'd like to leave you with the words of Steve Cook, which I think are especially appropriate. Legends are born of stories told, imagination without restriction. But what does a legend become when the truth outruns the fiction?
A cool summer morning in early June is when the legend began. At a nameless logging camp in Wexford County where the Manistee River ran. 11 lumberjacks near the Garland Swamp found an animal they thought was a dog. In a playful mood, they chased it around till it ran inside a hollow log. A logger named Johnson grabbed him a stick and poked around inside. Then the thing let out an unearthly scream and came out and stood upright. None of those men ever said very much about whatever happened then. They just packed up their belongings and left that night, were never heard from again. It was 10 years later in 97 when a farmer near Buckley was found. Slumped over his plow, his heart had stopped. There were dog tracks all around. 7 years past the turn of the century, they say a crazy old widow had a dream of dogs that circled her house at night. They walked like men and screamed. In 1917, a sheriff who was out a-walking found a driverless wagon and tracks in the dust like wolves had been a-stalking. Near the roadside, a 4-horse team lay dead with their eyes open wide. When the vet finished up his examination, he said it looked like they died of fright. In 37, a schooner captain said several crew members had reported a pack of wild dogs roaming Bowers Harbor. His story was never recorded. In 57, a man of the cloth found claw marks on an old church door. The newspaper said they'd been made by a dog. He'd had to stood 7'4". In 67, a van load of hippies told a park ranger named Quinlan they'd been awakened in the night by a scratch at the window. There was a Dogman looking in and grinning. Then in the summer of 87, near Luther, it happened again. At a cabin in the woods, it looked like maybe someone had tried to break in. There were cuts around the doors could have only been made by very sharp teeth and claws. He didn't wear shoes because he didn't have feet. He walked on just 2 paws. Legends are born of stories told, imagination without restriction. But what does a legend become when the truth outruns the fiction? The decades come, the decades go, people still swear they see. Interlock and Reed City, Mackinac, there was something looking back at me. And somewhere in the Northwoods darkness, a creature walks upright. And the best advice you may ever get is don't go out at night.